As a joke, the family sent the ugly daughter. But the mountain man fell in love instantly. The small frontier town of Willow Creek sat quietly between wide plains and tall mountains. Life there moved slowly. People worked hard, shared stories in the evenings, and knew almost everything about each other. But there was one man people talked about more than anyone else. His name was Elias Boone. Elias was known as the Mountain Man. He lived far away from the town, deep in the mountains where the forests were thick and the air was cool. He hunted, gathered food, and traded animal skins and herbs in town every few weeks. Most of the time, he stayed alone in his small wooden cabin. To the people of Willow Creek, Elias was a mystery. Some said he was quiet because he liked the peaceful mountain life. Others believed he simply did not belong among people. The truth was, no one really knew him well. Whenever Elias walked into town, conversation slowed down. People would watch him quietly. Children stared with curiosity, while adults whispered each other. Elias was tall and strong, with long brown hair and a thick beard. His clothes were simple and worn from years of living in the wilderness. His face was serious most of the time, but his eyes were calm and thoughtful. He rarely spoke more than a few words. He would trade his goods, buy the things he needed, and then leave town again. But one day, a rumor began spreading through Willow Creek. Someone said the mountain man wanted a wife. No one knew exactly where the story started, but soon everyone in town was talking about it. Imagine living up in those mountains, one shopkeeper said, shaking his head. No proper house, no neighbors, no comfort. Another person replied. People laughed about the idea. One evening, inside the town's busy general store, a wealthy family joined the conversation. The Hawthorne family was known in Willow Creek for their large house and their strong opinions. Mr. Hawthorne liked to joke about everything. "So the mountain man wants a wife?" he said with a grin. "That's what people say," the shopkeeper answered. Mr. Hawthorne laughed loudly. "Well, I suppose someone should help the poor fellow." The people around him chuckled. Mrs. Hawthorne smiled in a playful way. "We do have a daughter who spends too much time at home," she said. The room grew quiet for a moment. They were talking about Clara Hawthorne. Clara was the youngest daughter in the family. She was not like her older sisters, who loved fancy clothes and attention. Clara preferred quiet things, reading books, helping the garden, and watching birds in the trees. She was shy and soft-spoken. Many people in town thought Clara was strange because she did not enjoy parties or gossip like the others. Some people even whispered unkind things about her appearance. But Clara never complained. She simply stayed quiet and continued living her simple life. Mr. Hawthorne leaned on the store counter. "Well," he said with joking tone, "why not send Clara up to Mountain Man? Let her help him around his cabin." A few people laughed. It sounded like a harmless joke to them. "Maybe the Mountain Man will be grateful," someone added. The room filled with quiet laughter again. To them, it was just a funny idea. But no one stopped to think about how Clara might feel. The next morning, the Hawthorne family spoke to Clara about visiting the mountains. They told her that the mountain man might need help keeping his cabin clean and cooking meals. They said it would only be for a short time. Clara listened quietly. She understood that the idea had started as a joke. Even so, she did not argue. Part of her felt nervous. She had never traveled deep into the mountains before. The stories about Elias Boone were confusing. Some people said he was kind, while others said he was strange. But another part of Clara felt something else. Curiosity. She wondered what kind of person the mountain man really was. So the next day, with a small bag of supplies and a warm coat, Clara began the long trip toward the mountains. The path slowly climbed higher as the town disappeared behind her. Tall pine trees surrounded the narrow trail, and the air grew cooler with every step. After many hours of walking, she finally saw it. A small wooden cabin stood near the edge of a quiet clearing. Smoke gently rose from the chimney. Clara stopped walking. Her heart beat a little faster. This was the home of the mountain man. She took a deep breath and stepped closer. Before she could knock, the cabin door slowly opened. A tall figure appeared in the doorway. It was Elias Boone. For a moment, both of them stood still. Clara felt shy and looked down at the ground. But Elias did something unexpected. Instead of looking confused or annoyed, his face softened with quiet surprise. His eyes studied Clara carefully, not in a rude way, but with honest attention. Then, for the first time in a long while, the mountain man smiled. It was a small smile, but it was warm and sincere. "Hello," Elias said gently. And in that simple moment, something surprising began. Clara stood quietly in front of the small wooden cabin. The mountain air felt cool, and the tall pine trees moved gently with the wind. She had expected many things when she reached the mountain man's home. Kindness was not one of them. Elias Boone stood in the doorway, looking at her with calm eyes. His tall figure filled the doorway, but his voice had been soft when he greeted her. "Hello," he had said. Clara slowly looked up at him. For a moment, she did not know what to say. I'm Clara," she replied quietly. Elias nodded. "I know the Hawthorne family," he said. "They trade flour and tools in town." Clara felt a little embarrassed. She knew the reason she had been sent there was not serious for most people in town. It had started as a joke, but Elias did not laugh. He stepped aside and gently opened the door wider. "You must be tired from the walk," he said. "You can come inside." Clara hesitated for only a second before stepping into the cabin. The inside of the cabin surprised her. It was simple, but it was clean and well organized. A warm fire burned in the stone fireplace. Wooden shelves held jars of dried herbs and berries. A sturdy table stood near the window, and sunlight came through the glass and filled the room with soft light. It felt peaceful, not lonely like people in town had described. Elias closed the door behind her and walked toward the fire. "Would you like some tea?" he asked. Clara nodded slightly. "Yes, thank you." Elias placed a small kettle over the fire. His movements were calm and careful, like someone who had done the same work many times before. Clara watched quietly. This man was not scary. He did not seem rude or strange. In fact, he seemed thoughtful. While the water warmed, Elias spoke again. "The mountains can be a long journey for someone who is not used to them," he said. Clara smiled a little. "It was a long walk," she admitted. Elias poured warm tea into 2 cups and placed one on the table in front of her. "Rest first," he said kindly. Clara sat down and held the warm cup in her hands. The tea smelled like fresh herbs. For a few minutes, neither of them spoke, but the silence was not uncomfortable. Outside, birds chirped in the trees, and the wind moved softly through the forest. Finally, Clara gathered the courage to speak. "People in town say you live here all alone," she said. Elias smiled slightly. "That is mostly true," he answered. "Don't you get lonely?" Elias looked toward the window for a moment. "The mountains are full of life," he said. "Animals, trees, rivers, they keep you company." Clara had never thought about it that way. Back in town, people were always busy talking and rushing, but here everything felt calm. After finishing the tea, Elias stood up. "I should show you around," he said. "If you are staying for a while, it will help to know the place." Clara followed him outside. The clearing around the cabin was larger than she expected. A small garden grew near the side of the cabin. Rows of vegetables pushed through the soil, and bright green leaves moved in the breeze. "You grow all of this?" Clara asked. Elias nodded. "The mountains provide many things, but a garden helps." Clara walked closer to the plants. She loved gardening back home, but she had never seen vegetables growing in such a wild place. "They look healthy," she said. Elias smiled again. "I try my best." He then showed her the small path that led to a nearby stream where he collected fresh water. The clear water flowed over smooth stones, making a gentle sound. Clara felt more relaxed with every step. The mountain man that people joked about did not seem strange at all. He seemed kind. Later that evening, the sun began to set behind the tall mountains. The sky turned orange and gold. Elias started preparing dinner over the fire. Clara offered to help. "You don't have to," he said. "I'd like to," she replied. Elias nodded and handed her a small knife to cut vegetables. They worked together quietly. For the first time in a long while, Elias did not feel the usual silence of living alone. And for the first time in Clara's life, someone treated her like she truly mattered. When the meal was ready, they sat together at the wooden table. The food was simple but warm and comforting. Clara looked around the cabin again. Everything about the place felt honest and peaceful. She slowly realized something important. The people in Willow Creek had been wrong about Elias Boone. He was not a strange mountain man. He was simply a man who lived a quiet life. And as Elias looked across the table at Clara, he felt something surprising too. The moment he had opened the door and seen her standing there, something had changed. To the town, Clara might have been the girl they joked about, but to Elias, she seemed gentle, brave, and real. Life around Elias Boone's cabin slowly found a new rhythm. Each morning the sun rose over the tall pine trees, filling the clearing with warm golden light. Birds sang from the branches, and the cool mountain air carried the fresh smell of the forest. Clara had slowly become part of this peaceful life. At first, everything had felt new and uncertain to her. The mountains were quiet in a way she had never experienced before. There were no busy streets, no loud conversations, and no people watching her every move. But day by day, she began to feel more comfortable. Elias showed her many things about the mountain life. He taught her how to find wild berries safely in the forest. He showed her which plants could be used for cooking and which herbs could make warm tea during cold evenings. He even showed her how to read small signs in nature, like animal tracks in the dirt or changes in the weather. Clara listened carefully and learned quickly. She was not afraid of hard work, and Elias noticed that. Soon she was helping in the small garden beside the cabin. She planted new vegetables and arranged small flowers along the edges of the path. Slowly the clearing around the cabin began to look brighter and more welcoming. The little wooden cabin no longer felt like a lonely place. It felt like a home. In the evenings, Clara and Elias often sat outside near the fire. They would watch the sky change colors as the sun disappeared behind the mountains. Sometimes they'd talk about small things. Clara told Elias about life in Willow Creek, the busy market days, the loud celebrations, and the many different people in town. Elias listened with interest. He rarely visited town except when he needed supplies. So many of her stories felt new to him. But Elias also shared stories of his own. He spoke about the mountains, the changing seasons, and the quiet beauty of the forests. He described winters when the snow covered everything in white, and summers when the rivers flowed strong and clear. Clara loved hearing those stories. Slowly, she realized something surprising. She felt happier in the mountains than she had ever felt in town, back in Willow Creek. People often judged her without really knowing her. Many only saw her as the quiet daughter of the Hawthorne family. But here, Elias treated her with respect and kindness every day. He listened when she spoke. He valued her ideas, and he never made her feel small. Meanwhile, far away in Willow Creek, people were still talking about the mountain man and the joke they had created. One afternoon, a few townspeople gathered near the general store. "I wonder how long that girl stayed up there," one man said. "Probably not very long," another replied. "Life in the mountains is too hard." Some people laughed. They believed Clara would return home quickly, tired and unhappy. Finally, a small group decided to ride up into the mountains and see what had happened. They expected to hear a funny story. But when they reached a clearing near Elias's cabin, they stopped their horses in surprise. The place looked different. The garden beside the cabin was full of healthy vegetables and small, colorful flowers. The path was clean, and the cabin itself looked warm and welcoming. Smoke rose gently from the chimney, and in the middle of the clearing, Clara stood near the garden, watering the plants. She looked calm and content. The townspeople stared in confusion. This was not what they expected at all. At that moment, Elias stepped out of the cabin carrying a small basket of fresh vegetables. When he saw the visitors, he raised a hand in greeting. "Good afternoon," he said politely. The townspeople exchanged uncertain looks. They had expected an awkward scene, maybe even anger from a mountain man. Instead, they saw something very different. Clara walked over and smiled kindly. "Welcome to the mountains," she said. Her voice sounded confident, something they had never heard before. The people looked around again. Everything in the clearing showed signs of care and teamwork. It was clear that Clara had not been miserable here. In fact, she seemed happier than anyone had ever seen her. One of the men finally spoke. "So you decided to stay?" he asked. Clara nodded gently. "For now, yes." Elias stood quietly beside her. He did not say much, but his expression showed quiet pride. The townspeople slowly realized something important. The girl they had once joked about had found a place where she truly belonged. And the mountain man they had misunderstood was not lonely anymore. As the group rode back toward Willow Creek later that day, the laughter they once shared about the situation had disappeared. Instead, they carried a different feeling: surprise. Because sometimes the stories people expect to be jokes, after the townspeople returned to Willow Creek, the story of the mountain cabin quickly spread through the town. But this time, people were not laughing. They spoke about what they had seen with surprise in their voices. "The cabin looked beautiful," one woman said in the general store. "There were flowers everywhere," another person added. "And Clara looked happy," someone else said quietly. Many people found it hard to believe. The same girl who had once been the quiet daughter in the Hawthorne family home now seemed confident and peaceful in the mountains. And the mountain man who everyone believed was strange and lonely had created a warm and welcoming home. Back in the mountains, life continued calmly for Elias and Clara. Summer slowly moved toward autumn. The leaves on the trees began to turn bright shades of gold and red. The air became cooler, and the evenings grew longer. Clara spent many mornings working in the garden. She carefully gathered vegetables and herbs, preparing them for the colder months ahead. Elias continued his usual mountain work, checking traps, collecting firewood, and walking through the forest trails. But now he was not alone. Every evening when he returned to cabin, Clara was there. Sometimes she was reading near the fire. Sometimes she was cooking dinner. Other times she was simply sitting outside, watching the sunset over the mountains. The quiet life they shared felt natural. One evening, as the sun slowly disappeared behind the tall peaks, Elias and Clara sat beside the small fire outside the cabin. The sky was filled with soft orange light. For a while, neither of them spoke. The peaceful silence between them had become comfortable over time. Finally, Elias looked toward Clara. "Clara," he said gently. She turned to him. "Yes." Elias paused for a moment, choosing his words carefully. "When you first arrived here, I thought you might only stay a few days." Clara smiled softly. "So did I." Elias looked out toward the forest. "But the mountains feel different now," he continued. "They feel brighter." Clara felt warmth in her chest when she heard those words. Elias was not someone who spoke about his feelings easily, yet every word he said felt honest. After a quiet moment, Elias spoke again. "You could return to Willow Creek if you wish," he said kindly. "Your family may want you back home." Clara thought about the town for a moment. She remembered the busy streets, the loud conversations, and the way people often looked at her, without really knowing her. Then she looked around the clearing. The small garden she had helped grow, the warm cabin behind them, the peaceful mountains stretching far into the distance. And beside her sat the one person who had always treated her with simple kindness. Clara shook her head gently. "I don't feel like a visitor here anymore," she said. Elias turned to look at her. "You feel at home?" he asked. Clara nodded. "Yes." For a moment, Elias said nothing. Then he smiled. It was the same warm smile he had given her the very first day she arrived at the cabin. A few weeks later, Elias and Clara decided to visit Willow Creek together. It had been many months since Elias had walked through town with someone beside him. When they arrived, people quickly noticed them. Conversations slowed, just like they always did when Elias entered town. But this time something was different. Clara walked beside him confidently, greeting people politely. The townspeople looked surprised. Some even smiled kindly. The Hawthorne family was also surprised to see Clara again. Her parents noticed something they had never seen before. Their quiet daughter looked strong, calm, and happy. That evening, Elias spoke with Clara's parents and thanked them for allowing her to stay in the mountains. He then shared something important. He asked for their blessing to marry Clara. The request surprised many people in the room. But Clara's parents could clearly see the respect and care Elias had for their daughter. And Clara's bright smile showed how much she trusted him. Not long after that, a small wedding was held in Willow Creek. It was simple and peaceful. Friends and neighbors gathered to celebrate. The same people who once laughed about sending Clara to the mountains now watched quietly as she stood beside Elias Boone. The mountain man who had once lived alone now had a partner who understood his quiet world. And Clara, the girl who once felt invisible in town, had found a place where she truly belonged. After the wedding, Elias and Clara returned to their mountain home together. The cabin lights glowed warmly as evening fell across the forest. And from that day forward, the mountains were no longer the home of a lonely mountain man. They were the home of a family built on kindness, respect, and a love that no one in Willow Creek had ever